evening, and welcome to the Velocity of Now with me, your host, Thomas Sheridan. It is October 2nd, 2016, and this is the Sunday edition of the show, the Sunday Sermon, just something to make Sundays a little more interesting for you out there, rather than the usual crap that goes on the so-called Sabbath. And I hope you're all keeping well. It's an interesting time. We're going to be talking about that later. My website is thomassheridanarts.com and streetdruid.net. I haven't done much website work lately because, well, I've been very busy. I just got back from Switzerland where I was doing an interview over there that should be up soon on the Druid Code. It was a very nice time there. I was only there for a couple of days, and it's an interesting country, Switzerland, in that I probably wouldn't want to live there as it's very controlled and robotic. I felt like coming back to freedom when I came back to Ireland. But I did see CERN in the distance, and that was an interesting experience in itself. It was just a nice a couple of days break. I had a bit of free time between the recording, so I just basically sat in the garden there of the hosts who were putting me up, and very graciously, I might add, and I just pondered the world and the universe, and it was just nice to do that because I'm not the kind of person who does that. I'm always busy. I'm always doing things, so it was probably a good thing for me to do that. Now, it brought a lot of thought into me. I started thinking about people and my friends in real life and things I would like to do with them and help them with things and stuff like that. And it just was a way of kind of being introspective about myself and my place in the world, not in any kind of deep or philosophical or dark kind of way or anything like that. Just a little bit of self introspect without being kind of like navel gazing or anything like that. It's probably not a bad thing to do, or maybe it was bollocks. But anyway, CERN. About that ritual, that fake ritual that they showed in CERN. Well, that was the scientists making fun of something that really did happen there. Apparently, CERN, like all big scientific, like NASA and everyone else does this, they will invite Buddhists or Hindus or Catholics in to bless the place or do a service or something like that. There's 30-odd thousand people working the CERN infrastructure. So, there's all kinds of religious work. Not all atheists there, I'm sure. And Satanists, to their credit, are very good now at busting in on these things. There was a very funny one recently of a Satanist delivering an ode to the Dark Lord or something. It was really funny at some council chamber meeting in the US, and all the Christians were all like shaking in their boots and everything. If their God is so powerful, why would you be afraid of this guy who was singing a bloody song and dressed in a black cape? But anyway, apparently a group of Satanists did get into CERN under freedom of speech, saying, if you don't let us do this ritual, we'll claim that you have issues with religious freedom. So what that video is people at CERN making fun of the ritual that did happen. There's nothing spooky about it. Satanism is not like this thing that like your truth gurus all have you in terror of. It's just a kind of an interesting kind of almost atheistic religion of something. It's almost like Darwinism in a form of a religion, really. That's all it really always is. So anyway, that was a nice few days in Switzerland, and I have to say this. I mean, even though I like Ryanair, the discount airline that operates here out of Ireland, they're like one of the biggest airlines in the world, and I like the fact that they're cheap. That's about it. But when you go back to a regular airline like Swissair, you're actually treated like a human being on the plane. Like you have a nice, decent-sized seat. They came, to be given a breakfast in the morning on a morning flight, and I'm not asked for money, and it's, nice and friendly and comfortable. The plane is a beautiful new plane, and it's just a nice experience. It's not like being on a bus. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the cheap budget aspect of Ryanair, but you realize when you're flying a regular airline like them or Lufthansa or Aer Lingus or British Airways, how much nicer it actually is. But I think your man Michael O'Leary, who runs Ryanair, I think Ryanair is kind of like, and I know it's an Irish company, and it's it's what it is. But this is no joke. Ryanair, the more I think about it, represents the pathological or dark side of the Irish. in that the Irish love making money. Now, there's nothing wrong with loving to make money, and there's nothing wrong with working hard in commerce and stuff like that. But there's a dark aspect to that in the Irish too, is that there's this like "fuck you, I'm going to get rich" kind of thing. And like the Irish kind of brought that to America, that everyone should try to be a millionaire. Not necessarily a bad thing, I might add. There's nothing wrong with working hard and making money, but the Irish have that. Ryanair's and its attitude of like, yeah, here's an airline. Don't fucking complain about it. It's a cheap flight. Shut up and get on the plane, and just do it. It's making me rich. You're getting a cheap flight. No, fuck off. That's a kind of a dark side of the Irish psyche. I see that all the time. It's not like you're being ripped off, but it's almost like you exist not as a customer, but as the means to make someone incredibly wealthy. And talking about wealth comes in all forms. There's financial wealth, there's physical wealth, there's being a chick magnet has sexual wealth, being anything, being gifted, you have a creative wealth, and there's also a spiritual kind of wealth. And a lot of people confuse spirituality with piety. Spirituality and piety are not the same thing. Like, I'm a really good person. I'm so spiritual. I do nothing bad. That's all bollocks. That's all. Everyone does something bad. Everyone does bad things, because a truly spiritual person is someone who reflects both aspects of that experience, dark and light in equal balance. It's not like anyone who's like, I'm full of light. I'm such a spiritual person. I'm so spiritual. They're not really. They're not. They're denying the dark. That's why the whole New Ages are so dark and everything. There's so much darkness and all that shit. And you see like a certain truth guru who had a go at me recently, who projects a love image for all these years. Showed what's really lies behind his love image when he didn't get a cut of someone else's money. And started having a go at people. We saw what really lies behind the professional, we must all love each other, fucking bullshit. You shouldn't all love each other. Fuck that shit. You should only want to love people who deserve to be loved. Not ones, you shouldn't love everyone. That's that Christian bullshit again. Turn the other cheek, against your enemy. If he fucking hits you, you fucking give him one back or run away. That's what a spiritual person does. A slave turns the other cheek. Now, you can kind of tell I'm kind of a bit tense today. Not that I'm in a bad mood. I've had some good results this week. I've had a very good, productive week. I've done some good work, and I made a few quid in my regular job. I've been putting in a few extra hours. I am a bit tired because it's been a long week, and I'm not getting as young as I used to be, so I can't handle all this running around Europe and stuff like that, and going back to work and working all day and all night as easily as I used to be able to do. But that's okay. That's life. And so I'm a bit tense, and I bet you're a bit tense too. Even if things are going, even if it's going right, you're happy. Your husband is really loving to you. Your kids are great. But I bet you're feeling a bit tense at the moment, a bit wired up. And I'm going to try and explain that tonight to you. What's really going on is the Pazuzu effect. And before I get to that, I want to read something to you, and it's very related to the internet. I want to read something to you. Now, if you don't have this book, go out and find it. It's the Joseph Campbell's The Power of Myth with Bill Moyers. What it is, it's the transcription of the legendary interviews that they did on PBS in America back in 1989, whenever it was, and or it was older than that, back in the 80s anyway. And it's just basically the transcripts of the show. Now, what's good about that and what's worth having for it's got the index in the back, so you can find out on various different things. And there's one part in the interview that I want to read out here. This is Bill Moyers, the journalist, talking to Joseph Campbell, the mythologist. And Moyers says at one point, he goes, "There's a fetching story about President Eisenhower and the first computers." Campbell replies, "Eisenhower went into a room full of computers, and he put the question to the machines, is there a God? And they all start up, and the lights flash, and the wheels turn, and after a while the voice says, now there is." Moyers, but isn't it possible to develop towards your computer the same attitude of the chieftain who said that all things speak of God? If it isn't a special privileged relationship, revelation. God is everywhere in his work, including the computer. Joseph Campbell. Indeed so. It's a miracle. What happens on the screen? Did you ever look inside one of these things? Myers jokingly replies, no, and I don't intend to. Campbell. You can't believe it. No, we're talking about 1980s computers here now. We're not talking about like what you know. So he's using the vernacular of the time. Campbell. You can't believe it. It's a whole hierarchy of angels on all slats. And those little tubes, these are miracles. I have a revelation from my computer about mythology. You buy a certain software, and there's a whole set of signals that lead to the achievement of your aim. If you begin fooling around with the signals, he's talking about like the code for the software, that belong to another system of software, they just don't work. Similarly, in mythology, if you have a mythology in which a metaphor for the mystery is the Father, you are going to have a different set of signals from what you would have with the metaphor for wisdom and mystery of the world where the Mother. And they are two perfectly good metaphors. Neither one is a fact. They are metaphors. It is as though the universe were my Father. It is as though the universe were my mother. Jesus says, no one gets to be the Father but me. The Father that he was talking about was the biblical Father. It might be that you can get to the Father only by the way of Jesus. On the other hand, suppose you were going by the way of the Mother, then you might prefer Kali and the hymns to that goddess and so forth. That is simply another way to get to the mystery of your life. You must understand that each religion is a kind of operating software that has its own set of signals or code and will work. If a person is really involved in a religion and really building his life on it, he better stay with the software that he has got. But if it's a chap like myself who likes to play with the software, well, I can run around, but I probably will never have the experience comparable to that of a saint. Moyers. But haven't some of the greatest saints borrowed from anywhere they could? They have taken this from taken from this and that and constructed a new software. Campbell. This is what's called the development of religion. You can see it in the Bible. In the beginning, God was simply the most powerful God among many. He was just a local tribal God. And then in the 6th century, when the Jews were in Babylon, the notion of a world savior came in, and the biblical divinity moved into a new dimension. You can see an old tradition going only by renewing it in terms of current circumstances. In the period of the Old Testament, the world was like a three-layered cake, consisting of a few hundred miles around the Near Eastern centers. No one had ever heard of the Aztecs or even of the Chinese. When the world changes, then the religion has to be transformed. Now, this is interesting. This is important stuff now. First, the mention of the computer, that's one thing, and Campbell's idea of the software operating as codes, different types of software. Say Mac, and this is before the Mac came. This is before Windows came out. So you'd have Macintosh, Apple, and Windows. Or you'd have the software still does the same thing. They still might run Microsoft Word, Adobe Illustrator, but on their two different operating platforms, you cannot interchange the programs. It's the same thing with religion and a spiritual path. You can have your own path to it by Judaism and Catholicism, or being a Protestant and being a Taoist, but they can't mix. They can't mix. That's why that devotion to that system produces a different kind of, and also a powerful religious experience, but it's not practical to many of us today. You may have like a rabbi who studies the Talmud and the Torah and the Kabbalah constantly. Well, he will reach that, or a Catholic, a devout Catholic, say somebody who's a member of a charismatic group, that will happen too. But that's only within the specific part of their existence. However, if you take that individual and you expose it to a religious experience of another group, well, it causes the computer to break down. Their computer, their spiritual computer to break down. Now, in James Joyce's Ulysses, there's a guy who's one of the characters in it, Paddy Dignam. He's being buried at near the beginning of the book, and Bloom and the rest of them are going to his funeral up in Dublin. And because of the book, the way it's written, Dignam is a ferocious Catholic who hates. He didn't even. And Bloom's going to the funeral of a guy who hated him because he was Jew, and Bloom and Dignam hated Protestants, Methodists, Jews, everybody. And when he dies, he gets to heaven and discovers that God is a Buddhist. This is the kind of idea. Now, the same thing with the atheist, right? One of the reasons why atheism is not sustainable is because their model of the universe is totally based on the idea of reason, a mechanical aspect to it. Now, there's lots of reasons that they can't, and lots of circumstances there that show there's an inherent hypocrisy in that. So when an atheist has a religious experience or a spiritual experience, they deny it, or they go crazy, or they shut down. Now, this is because they don't understand the religiosity of their own worldview, their own model inside their own head. So you have a situation where you hear about this thing called dark matter, right? And dark matter is the main force in the universe, right? All dark matter is the name for the stuff they can't explain. The majority of the universe. And as some people have pointed out, dark matter is probably consciousness. They can't explain, for instance, how a galaxy does not produce enough gravitation to hold itself together, yet it does. Yes, it does. So, I actually believe that dark matter is consciousness, and they can't explain it, so they call it dark matter. That's a cop-out. The atheist is having a cop-out, They're having a cop-out. And that's because they're faced with something that their own operating software, their religiosity of their own atheism, can't function when it goes out into a different model. And this brings us to the basic thing of tonight's show. I mentioned at the start, I'm feeling a bit, and you can probably hear it in my voice. I've been kind of the shows of recent times have been kind of like more calm, but I'm back to this kind of thing again a little bit. That's a part of my personality. I'm an easygoing, laid back guy, but like anyone else, things piss me off now and again, and I bet you're being pissed off at the moment, and there's a reason for that. You see, the internet, amazing again. I look at my Facebook wall, and I keep on there lots of people who I normally wouldn't want them in my life. I don't communicate with them, but I use them as controlled specimens. And often they're the people who are psychically infected. And when I say psychically infected, is that they have such a poor psychic firewall that they're very easily fired up and rattled. But they're phenomenal control subjects to allow you to sort of understand psychic weather. It's probably a good way to put this. There's a psychic climate just as much as there's a meteorological climate. And so these controlled specimens, right on cue, about 6 days ago, start flooding Facebook with photographs of dead babies in the Middle East with their brains hanging out, people being beheaded, animals being tortured, and then the usual comment like saying things that were against Jews, saying things, he's trying to rationalize putting this stuff on their news feed and saying things like, oh, these bastards Jews or these bastard Muslims, or, these fuckers killing this dog or this cat, they should be hunted down and strung up. And that's not why they posted this stuff. They posted this stuff because they're psychically infected. And I'm going, something's coming. And sure enough, it was. It did come. And I couldn't quite put my finger on it until things started to roll in together. Last week, I was contacted by Aaron Franz and Adam from, they do that memes and themes things. Adam, Aaron from, he made that, I haven't been in touch with the guy for so long, I forgot. He does the stuff on transhumanism and alchemy, the age of transition. Sorry, Aaron. And they asked me to suggest a film. And they had just done The Wicker Man, and I would have liked to have been a part of that because I quite like The Wicker Man. People say, well, it makes heathens and pagans look really bad. But it also makes human beings look really beautiful. I mean, I love the character of Sergeant Howie, played by Edward Woodward. Here's a man, although he may be a fundamentalist Calvinist Protestant, he's not there to put these people down because they're pagans. He's there to save a little girl. That's what he's there for. And so the idea of this sort of like giving up your life to save the little girl, I just blurted out, well, why don't we do The Exorcist? And so what we do The Exorcist. I think Adam said he'd seen it years ago as a kid, and Aaron Franz said he'd never seen it. So I gave them homework to watch it again. And I said to them, like, watch it not as a horror film. And so that's what makes that. So that's I don't know. I thought at the time that was the reason why I blurted out exorcism. Watch The Exorcist. Sorry. So then, as usual, my Facebook news feed starts flashing up images of scenes from The Exorcist or jokes about The Exorcist or something. Like someone took the scene where Linda Blair is vomiting the green vomit, and they put they put a cartoon image on it to make it look funny. I don't know what it was. I forget what it was. And that kind of thing, it just came out of nowhere afterwards. So, here I'm thinking, okay, this is a magic spell I've accidentally unleashed. But it wasn't. This is a predictive insight that I had. And it really, then it dawned on me, maybe we're having a Pazuzu episode now. And then when I got back from Switzerland, I was in the supermarket in town getting some groceries, and walking through the car park, I saw from the southwest, and from the south and the west, the most fucked up wind and cloud formation that was quite terrifying. There was, you get interesting clouds in this part of the world anyway, but this one was bizarre. There was the regular clouds above, the regular like high big rain, the storm clouds you get this time of year, but below there were these, I can only describe them as black tubes of dark cloud racing at a very low level. I'm talking about only a couple of 100 feet up and coming at me like a giant fucking hand. It looked like a big hand coming to grab me. And then I said, it's Pazuzu. It's Pazuzu. Now, those of you, and that's Pazuzu is the demon that possesses Linda Blair in The Exorcist. And that's what's causing all the shit on the internet. Now, Pazuzu is one of the most ancient gods or demons in the world. That's still, that's come with us from the Mesopotamian religion. So Pazuzu is associated with that part of the world, Babylon, Sumer. Now, the demon is an interesting one. Okay. Now, its depiction is of animal and human parts, often a human head or a body of a man. He's a classic zoomorphic god you have all around the world. The head of a lion or the head of a human or a dog, and also the talons of an eagle on its feet, and a pair of wings and a scorpion tail. So this is a mean mother, okay? Now, the most famous image of him Pazuzu of all, is the one that they used in the Exorcist movie. The priest at the beginning picks up the effigy of Pazuzu from the sand and says something about evil fights evil. It was a premonition he was having. Now, that's another interesting thing. What he was picking up out of sand in Babylon of the Pazuzu was in the Babylonian days, and in the religion of that era, Pazuzu was banished from a home or from a town by building wax effigies as accurate as possible of him, or ones of dough or of mud, and then dissolving them by pouring warm water over them. So dissolving it or burying it. And that's what the father from The Exorcist picks up a buried one. And then later on, he encounters Pazuzu as a giant statue in the desert of Iraq. And he knows that he's having, the battle is on. The battle between his religion and that of Pazuzu is on. And the pivotal scene is the wind blowing. and the wind blowing in the elderly priest's face as he stares upon Pazuzu. And that's the thing with Pazuzu. He is the demon that arrives by the south and the southwest wind, exactly where that bloody black fingers were flying through the sky over where I lived. He is associated with famine and anything that destroys food, locusts and that kind of thing. He's invoked through behaviors. Now, he is heavily connected to this horrific goddess called Lamashtu, which is also a deviation of the Lamia, a similar kind of goddess. There are almost like subcults that have developed around him in the West, sub entity cults. The Harpies is one. So he's associated strongly with female hysteria. Female hysteria is what the Harpies... The Harpies represent female hysteria. Poisonous, toxic women banding together to start shit with other women or with men. Very heavily connected with that. Pazuzu hates the Jews in particular and Christians because the Christians are seen as the descendants of particularly Catholics. So his main enemies are Catholics and Jews because he's a Babylonian demon and he played his energy force. Now, you don't have to believe in these things as actual entities or beings. Think of energy systems, okay? Think of energy sources. So when you see a flare-up of anti-Semitism on the internet by these dregs who just hate the Jews and post pictures of... They just post pictures of, dead Arab babies in Gaza and stuff like that. That's usually a Pazuzu, especially when it flares up. That's a Pazuzu experience. So, for instance, you see, these archetypes are relevant in in all kinds of aspects of society. So, say like the Israeli incursion into Gaza, a few years ago, right? You had Palestinians firing rockets. Now, don't give me this thing that they were just small. They were still fucking rockets, right? Palestinians firing rockets at Jewish settlements. Now, this was... did they not think that... Did they think that the IDF was going to do nothing? You see, this is what I find amazing about it. And that's because they were possessed by Pazuzu. And then they fire at the IDF, and the IDF come over and they start fucking bombing the shit out of Gaza. And they're possessed as well by this Pazuzu archetype energy. And it becomes like this secular force of malicious power. Pazuzu is the instigator of trouble. Now he's the king of the demons of the wind. But as we're living in an age of the electronic, in the electromagnetic spectrum, I've noticed that when the Pazuzu archetype is blowing up all over the internet and these images of animals and children being killed and all these other kinds of things, the internet generally goes dead because other people shut off, and that's a drought. See, a drought is not just literally food. It could also be a drought of information, of ideas, of creativity. He causes stagnation, and the stagnation causes decay and rot, and eventually whips up hysteria. Hysteria is always a product of mass hysteria, group hysteria, of stagnations that lead to fears. There's economic stagnation, there's social, political stagnation. And that eventually leads to a need to create energy, and that energy is created by pathological winds, and the same thing happens on the internet. Pazuzu is a super demon. He's probably more powerful than the devil. He's not as powerful as Choronzon 333, but he's a different kind of force. He comes from the Middle East, and his main target is Jews and Catholics. Apparently, that's from what if you just see, it just seems to be that way. It's the same kind of thing as the Jews. You see, Protestants and Catholics are very different. Catholics live in a kind of their version of Christianity is very magical and superstitious. So therefore, they're in a kind of a charged magical state because of things like the transubstantiation, the Eucharist, and so on. Protestants don't have that. This is why I have that thing called the Jerusalem syndrome, where Christians who go to Jerusalem suddenly start thinking they're Jesus because they're overwhelmed by the experience. And I saw an interview years ago of the head of the Jerusalem police, and he said if in all the 20 years he's experienced it, he says not one single Catholic has ever had Jerusalem syndrome. He says they're always Protestants. They're always Protestants because the Catholics still have, like the Orthodox Christians, they still have the magic, where the Protestants don't. And that's why they're easier to whip up into cults and things like that, because they're seeking a magical experience. But they're also easier for Pazuzu to jump in, because Pazuzu is also the tormentor of the innocent. So, for instance, Pazuzu looks for an innocent mind. And I see that with people who are waking up, they've been very innocent of the world and the control system, and they're very easy to infect. They're very, very easy to infect, and these are the ones who are generally driven insane. Now they're insane. They're driven insane by that. So right now, Pazuzu energy, the Pazuzu entity, the king of the demons of the wind, the brother of the god Humbaba and the son of the god Hanbi, is very powerful right now, and it's getting a lot of us edgy, and you're seeing all this horrific behavior on the internet. There's one woman I was talking to today who is a very nice lady. All she does is post her crafts on the internet, on the Facebook, and last week she was being called all kinds of names by disgusting people. They're whipped up into Pazuzu energy, and this could also be Coranzon 333. But generally, this funny thing about these demons is they don't work together. It's the funniest thing. Like, it's almost like one shuts the other off. It's like the game, just like Joseph Campbell spoke at the beginning of the book. The software, it's different. The software is different. There's also a strong Kali for now. Here's our salvation at the moment is Kali and Lilith. We right now we badly need a powerful maternal energy force, and I'm seeing it develop. We need the women to come forward and to chastise the men, because the men at the moment are mad. We're being fucked up by this Pazuzu energy. We need the women to come forward and to bitch slap us for once. Well, not for once, but this time we need it right now. And this is where Kali and Lilith are very powerful at the moment. We've also had the Black Moon thing, and that's a significant. That's an indicator of the shadow psyche of the female. And remember, it's not a negative thing. It's just the shadow psyche of the female rising up to bitch slap the men. We need it right now. You need a woman to slap you around. We need Kali. Kali is what's the liberation of this right now. I've been talking to some chap on the internet. One of my Facebook friends told me that he's having this. He's really, things are dark. He feels very old at the moment, energy drained. And another thing you might notice with the Pazuzu energy is swarms of flies. Now, flies are often usually associated with Beelzebub, who is the Lord of the Flies. But this will also be an effect of Pazuzu, and also slugs. You might be affected by a slug invasion, especially if it's really affecting you. You go inside your house, you might see your house covered in slug trails from top to bottom. That's also a good way of noticing an evil person. I'll tell you a story about that another time. But I met a very evil woman I once had a brief encounter with. Her house in England was covered in slug trails like I'd never seen in my life. And so that's one to look out for as well. Now, the ancient Babylonians, we know what they did. They made an effigy of Pazuzu out of water, out of wax, and out of bread dough, and out of sand, mud, and they melted it with hot water. Well, it won't work for us because we're not Babylonians, so it won't work for us because we're not. That's not our magic. We're not involved in that kind of magic. So the best thing to do is to ignore it, right? Ignore it, and you'll need lots of salt. If you get good quality salt, I'm talking about like really good quality sea salt, and generally just throw it around the house. Salt is a good repellent for Pazuzu. These kinds of dark energies, because the same way salt kills a slug. You see how it all works? As above, so below. as exterior, interior, subconscious, conscious, psyche, ego. It all works together. Now, it is all reflective of each other. So salt is a good cleansing force anyway. A bag of linen, a nice piece of linen, or even a good quality sock. Once it's not polyester now, and fill it full of good quality sea salt, and put it in there and put it beside your pillow or on your bed. Very good for that, for dealing with that. This way you won't have terrible nightmares and night terrors and stuff like that. The mentally ill, of course, they're the first to be triggered by Pazuzu or Choronzon energy, and you will see like that happening. I call it Danzig effect as well, because of a certain flare-up that happened in Danzig prior to World War II. There's an article on my web, I'll post it below, called the Danzig effect, and so that's that. So it's not going to, that's not going to work. Building the effigy, salt, good quality salt. Now, not this fucking Morton or Saxon table or Tesco's table salt. I'm talking about salt that's actually been extracted from the sea, not salt that's been mined in the earth. Go to your health food shop, go to the gourmet section. There's plenty of decent salt, and I'm also not. Tibetan salt is no good either. It has to be salt from the sea. So the Americans, they call that kosher salt there because it comes from the ocean. And get the sea salt. Don't get the mined salt, and that includes the Tibetan salt because that's mined. And keep that around you in a sock if it's not polyester. Bring it to bed with you. Throw salt around the house. It's a good thing to do anyway, because of the ionization anyway, of health benefits too. And so do that. And most important one of all is, if you see this behavior on the internet, ignore. Just don't go online. Just stay off it, or delete these people. I keep this. Because of my work and who I am, I have to keep these control specimens on in order to monitor them, so I can actually help you guys out there and tell you when there's a flare up coming. And so that's different for me. But if you have this lunatic guy who's posting pictures of animals being tortured, and it says things like. He says something like, we should get this bastard for he did this cat or this dog. He's not doing it for that reason. He's harvesting energy from the people watching that video or that photograph on behalf of Pazuzu. At the moment, it could be Choronzon 333 another time. Choronzon 333 is more of an insulting demon. He'll attack you. But this Pazuzu just causes anxiety and chaos and a feeling of that there's something terrible. It's a shit feeling right now, and that's how I'm feeling. That's how it feels at the moment. It will pass, of course, it will pass. But every so often, this demon has to harvest. It has to harvest. So don't tolerate these assholes on the internet. They'll never get better. They only get worse. Those types. And don't stay away from toxic people and mentally ill people. And that doesn't mean you should shun mentally ill people. I'm talking about people who have psychosis. Until this passes, stay away from them, because and trauma vampires are very hungry at this time. And the salt, and you'll be fine. You'll be fine, and be aware of what's going on. And so that's the Sunday sermon for this week. I don't know how long the show was. It seems pretty short. It's only been 40 minutes. I promise you I'll do longer shows this Thursday. I've been just so tight for time. So ride out the Pazuzu energy and continue invoking that magical lifestyle of yours. As I said, I've done some good interviews lately. I've enjoyed them. There's one on the Leak Project. If you look onto my magic playlist on here, you will see that. I did a very nice chap there called Rex. I did a great one with John Gibbons on Alchemy Radio, and I've got a two-parter coming up to celebrate the 200th anniversary of Legalized Freedom with Greg Moffat on the Druid Code. So lots to look forward to, and I promise I'll give you a much better shows this Thursday night. Have a lovely Sunday regardless. Don't worry about this energy. And you women, we need you to step forward right now and give us men a good spanking. And not to be kinky, but I mean, we need bring out the Kali in you, bring out the Lilith in you, and put us men straight. And all the best. See you on Thursday, and feck them if they can't take a joke, and that includes Pazuzu.